365 Sports. Taylor McHargue, ESPN college football analyst. And Taylor, we're starting to get more and more evidence, and of course we'll get more and more this weekend from the games we watch. Just before we get into this weekend, anything from last weekend that jumped out more to you than anything else? Obviously, Texas-Alabama was very tight. Brigham Young-Baylor was a physical knockdown, drag-out. But anything from last week that kind of comes first to mind?
Well, it's been talked about all week, but I got to start in Austin because I went on every radio show I went on and every segment I did last week. I said Alabama was going to hang 50 on Texas. And Texas' defensive line played at a level that we haven't seen in, more than 10 years. And I thought their performance on the defensive side of the ball specifically was one of the most impressive things I've seen in a long time because they were getting pressure with four. I mean, they were winning one-on-one battles in the trenches that I don't think anybody really expected. So I would start there in Austin. I think the challenge, obviously, is can Coach Sarkisian continue that momentum? Can they get that week in and week out? And then the other thing, I was impressed with Texas Tech's ability to come back and win against Houston. That 4th and 20 that they picked up in overtime, that's the sort of statement-type play that you point back to at the end of the season and say, hey, that could have been, you look up, if they end up with a 7, 8, 9 win season, I don't think they're going to get to 9. But if they make a bowl game in the first year under Joey McGuire, that's the type of play you point back to and say, hey, that was a momentum moment for us. So I would say those two things.
Taylor, I'm curious your thoughts on the Alabama wide receivers and how they've kind of found themselves in this spot. And really this goes back to the postseason last year where they lost Jameson Williams, they lost John Mechie, and then when they played Georgia again, they couldn't really stretch the field like they were used to. It appears they haven't really found somebody to take their place yet.
It was interesting. You're right. There was not the degree of separation that we are used to seeing with Alabama, where you'll have guys, even in the SEC, running away from people in the secondary. But I also thought, take it back to Bryce Young and the duress that he was put under. I thought he was uncomfortable for a lot of that game. And if you take away the easy throws, right, if those aren't there, the shot plays where any quarterback in Division I can throw it up and it's a home run ball. If those aren't there and a quarterback's having to work through their progression going 1 to 2 to 3, if they've got any sort of pressure on them, that's where it starts to get pretty challenging. And we saw a lot of that for Bryce Young that week.
Have you been able to watch much of Jaren Hall?
Not as much as I'd like to.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, I know we were talking to somebody the other day that's NFL related, and they hadn't really heard much buzz when it comes to Jaren Hall. But I don't know. I feel, Taylor, like we're going to start to hear some, especially if BYU can go get another win like last weekend, going to Oregon and get a W tomorrow. But what have you thought about what you have seen from him and BYU?
I thought BYU's defense was impressive last week. I thought Baylor's defense limited some of what BYU wanted to do. I think Jaren Hall, there's a lot of upside there for him. I think he's not as big as, and I'm drawing a blank on their quarterback that's now with the Jets. Forgive me.
Zach Wilson.
But I don't think Zach Wilson, I don't think he's got the upside that a Zach Wilson does. But what impressed me last week was, really for both those teams, it was a rock fight. I mean, that was a physical football game. I think there's still a lot of upside for Baylor through the rest of this season. But I was impressed with BYU, how they closed out that game. If they win this week, all of a sudden, I think BYU, we have to start having the discussion around if they continue to win and they get Arkansas at home later in the year, all of a sudden this becomes a potential playoff team.
What are your thoughts with Quinn Ewers? Obviously looked very good early on, and then the injury, Card gutted it out for Texas after that. What do you do if you're Texas? You try to figure it out. Charles Wright's names come up. Roschon Johnson can run the Wildcat. What do you do?
I think you just try to survive this week, get Hudson Card healthy. You're going to be without Quinn Ewers for a few weeks. I know the injury that he's dealing with. I dealt with that even for the non-throwing shoulder. That is a challenging, difficult injury to come back from. You're going to have to figure it out for, especially this week. Get through, use Roschon Johnson like you're talking about. Do Wildcat if you need to. Whatever it takes to move past a UTSA team that UTSA returned a lot of production on the offensive side of the ball, but they did not on defense. And I think Texas should be able to score plenty, even with your third-string guy in or running the Wildcat. They should be able to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And then you're just trying to buy time and see if you can get to, hopefully, I don't know if Quinn Ewers is going to be back by the time they play OU, but there was enough that Hudson Card did that leads me to believe, okay, I think they can go beat Texas Tech with them behind center. But obviously the key emphasis is to try and get Quinn Ewers healthy as fast as possible.
Yeah, I think you're right about UTSA's defense not quite being what they were last year, and they got to be exhausted at this point. Like, they played so many overtimes just 2 weeks in, so that knocks them down a notch for me. But you said you've had that same injury. Can you kind of go deeper into exactly what Ewers is dealing with and how that would affect? I know it's not, you said it wasn't your throwing arm, but how that affects him.
Well, the key with that injury is as soon as it gets hit again, it's going to hurt. And he's going to deal with that the rest of the season. That injury is not going to get healthy until the offseason. And so what they're going to – it's really just going to become a pain tolerance thing for him. And as soon as he feels like he can go back out on the field, they won't talk about it because it's kind of taboo, but they'll shoot up his arm. He's going to get a shot in his shoulder. It'll numb it for the game. He'll go out and play, and then it's going to feel like somebody hit it with a hammer the next day. And he's just going to have to deal with this the rest of the season. Guys all over the country are dealing with this. As soon as he feels like he can get through a game, he'll be back out there. I think that's the plus side here is that it doesn't require surgery. But it's a challenging injury to move on from because it is extremely painful, even if it's not your throwing arm.
Max Johnson is now the starter, Taylor, at Texas A&M. He's a guy who's got a lot of skins on the wall when well, not a lot, but a couple of skins on the wall about wins in the SEC. Haynes King just looked very hesitant last week. What do you think about the QB switch for A&M?
I thought they had to do something. But my concern, it goes beyond Haynes King. I've got some issues and some concern and worries with the scheme that they're running in College Station. Jimbo Fisher's style of play is a much more, I don't know if old school is the right way to say it, but it's a pro style offense. It's a very wordy offense. And to me, I'm worried about, for both of these guys, are they thinking too much? And it feels like they're not manufacturing explosive plays to your key skill positions. And that is the mark of a good play caller and a good offensive coordinator is simplify and get the ball to your playmakers. And right now, you talk about Alabama not getting separation. A&M was covered like a glove by Sam Houston State in week 1. And then App State turns around and they just executed their game plan. They played keep away. They did it to perfection with an offense that is capable of doing that. Just sit on the ball and don't give A&M any possessions. And that's exactly what they did. Miami's going to bring a different level of athlete into town than they've seen the first 2 weeks. But I actually think the good news for A&M is this should be the shot in the arm with Max Johnson to hopefully get some downfield passing plays, some explosive plays in the run game as well. Try and kickstart this offense. Gosh, do they need a win this week?
Man, they sure do. I want to know, how can Jacksonville State get up for Tulsa, the game you have, without knowing it's Florida State?
Paul, I wanted to specifically single this one out for you. I know how much you love Jacksonville State.
Yeah.
What's interesting is Rich Rodriguez, head coach, formerly from West Virginia and Arizona. He's been in Michigan, he's been all over the place. Now the head coach at Jacksonville State. They are moving up to FBS next year, going into Conference USA. So they're already at above the FCS scholarship limit right now. They're 3-0. All their margins of victory are by 15, 20 points at least. And I think they're only like a touchdown underdog on the road to Tulsa. So this is not a game that's going to get national headlines, and I completely understand that. But it is one that it would not shock me if Jacksonville State goes out and beats Tulsa, who's 1-1 and really was a play away from losing last week to Northern Illinois at home.
Taylor, I've been through a lot as a Florida State fan of good and bad. Mostly good. I mean, I can't complain. They won the national championship my sophomore year in school, so I cannot complain. But the lowest point of my sports fan life was that Jacksonville State play last year, because I did not know.
How could it not be?
Yeah, I did not know what to think. I was like, what just happened?
Yeah. Not only losing.
I mean, that was unbelievable, because that was not a very good Jacksonville State team.
No.
Oh, you mean it? They didn't.
No, it was
They weren't 10-2.
I was just standing in my kitchen.
I think they fired their head coach after that season.
Yeah. Hey, have fun with that game. Thank you so much, Taylor. Love the segment on Fridays with you. Entering the weekend, looking back at the previous as college football continues roaring through the month of September. Taylor McHargue, ESPN college football analyst, with us on 365 Sports and Sikkim 365 Radio.